Welcome back to the Word on Fire show. I'm Brandon Vaught, the host and the content director at Word on Fire. And with us, as he is each week, is the illustrious Bishop Robert Barron. Bishop Barron, welcome.
Hey, Brandon. Always good to be with you. How you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. We just crossed 3 major thresholds on our new media platforms. I think we talked about one of them a couple episodes back. We got 1 million downloads now of this show, the Word on Fire show. That was exciting. But then on your other platforms, you just crossed 1 million followers or 1 million likes on Facebook, which is a huge accomplishment. And then almost the same week, you crossed 20 million views on YouTube. Now, what's your reaction to all of these accomplishments? I'm thinking back maybe 10, 15 years ago. None of these things would have been on your radar, would they?
Oh, gosh, no. I mean, first of all, I'm thrilled by it and really grateful to so many people. First on the Word on Fire side, people like yourself and many others that have made this possible. But also, gosh, all those people that have accessed our work, God bless you. All those who've come on YouTube over the years, 20 million times, all the Facebook followers. So, yeah, and then this show, you and I and Father Steve and others, kind of cooked up this show not that long ago. It seems to me like yesterday. And that we've had now over 1 million downloads of it, I think is staggering. I know maybe it seems like a banality, but it's the spiritual hunger. If you put something about the spiritual order out there that's the least bit intelligent or coherent, or attractive, I think people, they'll come to it. They'll listen. So I find that really uplifting and encouraging, and I hope it's encouraging to a lot of people. That's a principle, from economics. If someone's doing really well in a given business, all right, that means there's a big audience out there. It means I can get in that thing too, and fair enough. I'm great with that. I'm not in competition with other Catholic evangelizers, and let's all get in there and let's do what we can, So I find that very encouraging, and I hope others do too. But I'm filled above all with a sense of gratitude about it.
I think we saw that same rising tides of lift all boats effect with the Catholicism series. After you released that, the level and the scope of Catholic media, it seems to me, started to rise. We're seeing other documentaries, other high-level productions, other beautiful representations of the church. I'd like to talk through how we can accomplish that same thing through social media. That's the topic of today's show, how to evangelize through social media. I know I hear from people all the time who see what you're doing and they say, I want to do something like that. I want to figure out how to use Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or Instagram to share my faith. And so let's spend this episode talking about your experiences in this realm. So first of all, how'd you get started in this work of new media evangelization? What put it on your radar?
Well, probably the new media side, because I started evangelization work with radio and then with the website and then some making DVDs. So that's not really new media stuff. I suppose it was YouTube. I believe it was invented in 2006. Is that right? Because it was right after YouTube came into being that we decided to put some videos up on YouTube. Because we started early 2007, so it'll be another milestone. It'll be 10 years in a few months. That's probably my first foray into what we call now new media. And it was just, heck, here's this thing. Here's this tool. Why wouldn't we try it? That was sort of my thinking. Why wouldn't you try? I had zero sense that, there's a big audience and, it's going to be really successful. None. We thought, well, we got a little bit of money from a donation, and why don't we try it? See what happens. I remember very, very early on when I was talking to Mike Leonard, who became very influential with the Catholicism series. This is many years ago, long before the Catholicism series. And he had this idea of, why don't you come on and just talk about what's going on in the news or in movies. And I remember he suggested that one of his daughters, Carrie, who eventually worked for a time at Word on Fire, that she'd be a great sort of interlocutor, or maybe she could, raise a question that young people might have. So that was an early idea. So when we got the money and the opportunity, I said, well, why don't we go back to that idea of movies? So the first one we did was Scorsese's movie, The Departed. And in the beginning, we did, I think, a lot of movie reviews. In fact, we filmed some of the first ones at the auditorium at Mundelein Seminary, which looks like a movie theater. and a little bit of that Siskel Ebert vibe. Maybe people don't know what Siskel Ebert is anymore, but kind of the movie reviewer. So that's how it got going. And I remember distinctly being thrilled when the first video reached like 300 views. Like, hey, really, 300 people watched that video? So it started small. It was a real mustard seed principle. And then if you had told me then that we'd be crossing the threshold of 20 million views, I would never, ever, ever believe it.
Now, you say that when you first started on YouTube, you thought it was mainly a broadcast medium, that you would produce a video, put it up on the website, and then people could come and watch it. You had no idea that people could come and comment. Isn't that right?
No, not really, because I honestly had not really watched a lot of YouTube. I heard about it, and maybe I'd seen, a few little funny videos. But no, I didn't realize the interactive quality. Now, I'll say this. I like that. I'm kind of a valuable guy. I like to talk and argue, and so I kind of liked it. But at the same time, I was kind of shocked at first. I'm not anymore, but I was shocked at first by the level of the vitriol. But Paul Tillich said religion is ultimate concern. So whenever you talk about religion, it's not like I'm doing a blog on nuclear physics or a blog on entomology or something. When you're doing something on religion, it's almost guaranteed to stir people up, either positively or negatively. So once I got over the shock of that, then I kind of enjoyed it,
And see, I like that. I like that it elicits a reaction from somebody. I think a far worse problem is just indifferentism. If they don't care at all.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're going to your video and they're sitting down and typing out a comment, even if it's angry and vitriolic, it tells you that it's at least stirring in their mind.
Yeah. And it's, as I've often said, getting outside the walls of the church. It's reaching people that would never, ever come to church. But that's the missionary thing. And again, look at the first missionaries that went into these areas, of absolutely no belief. Well, a lot of them were killed. I'm not being killed yet, on YouTube. No one's doing physical harm to me. So my little struggles are very small compared to, the great Christian missionaries of the past. But this is our way today of being missionary, I think, in this culture.
You've often described the internet in a missionary way as the new Areopagus. What do you mean by that?
Well, the Areopagus, what a powerful symbol, right? It's that when I finally went there, I was amazed by the Areopagus. I don't know what I was expecting, but you go to Athens and there it is, right below the Parthenon, one of the most famous buildings in the whole world. And right below it is this big, big rocky outcropping. It's not like I thought it was going to be like a public square or something, or a plaza. It's this big rock. And it's where they had, a lot of these public debates and stuff in ancient times. And that's where St. Paul gives this early sermon, to a skeptical audience. And what he was doing then that day is very much analogous to what a lot of us are trying to do now using social media. You go to a place, to a forum where a lot of views are on display. You're not going to meet a sympathetic audience. You're not talking to the choir. You're speaking to often very skeptical or very antipathetic people. Okay. How many listened to Paul? Almost nobody. Most walked away. Many laughed at him, right? But a handful of people stayed. And, excuse me, I've often said they become the source of European Christianity, those people that listen to Paul. So it's still worth doing today.
Now talk a little bit about the style and the production quality of the social media at Word on Fire. It's fairly rare, for instance, for a YouTuber to sit in a chair and just talk for 9 to 10 minutes on high-level philosophy or theology, but that's what you do, and it's tremendously successful. Why do you think that style has been effective?
My honest answer, Brandon, is I don't know. We decided to do something that would be accessible, but at the same time substantive, because I've been a great opponent of dumbed down Catholicism. Very early on, we had a kind of a media advisor who suggested that I not wear a Roman collar that I wear, casual clothes, that I should not be sitting in front of a bookshelf, that I should be kind of outside, or I don't know what he wanted, but I never wanted to go that way. And I guess I see it as maybe a form of respect for the audience, that I don't think I've got to bend over backwards or condescend to a younger audience. And I'll tell you the God's truth. When we first started, I never imagined like high school kids watching. I didn't design it for high school kids. And yet it's been used massively by kids that age, and teachers have picked up on the videos and used them. So I think we've just, underestimated what kids are capable of. And, 10 minutes or 9 minutes is not asking that much of someone's attention span. I realize in the post-MTV, now generations, everyone's kind of just automatically ADD, but they've worked. That's all I can say. They've worked. And I'm not quite sure why, but maybe it's a sign that people are capable of more than we think they are.
Now let's talk about the obvious toxic and vitriol atmosphere that swirls around social media. Anybody who's been online, anybody who's visited a comment box knows what we're talking about here. But I find that when I talk with church leaders about social media, the immediate connotation is a bad one, and they're immediately cautious and afraid. How do you navigate those waters?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, as I say, I was first surprised by it when I came across it on YouTube. And then, as you say, anytime you're in the social media world, you're going to find it. And the reason is obvious. Years ago, like when I was a kid, if someone wanted to write an angry letter about an article, well, they'd have to write it down and fold it up, put it in an envelope, address it to some right person, put a stamp on it, wait several days. And then if they were lucky, the person might open the letter and then probably would say, well, this person's crazy, right? So it was extremely difficult to get your vitriolic reaction out to the wider world. Now it's as easy as anything. Just you have an immediate reaction. You put your fingers to the keyboard. There's no censor. There's no editor. It just goes out. So I get why it happens a lot. Is it discouraging? Yes, I would say. And even though I'm used to it, it's still discouraging. Like just the other day, I still go on the YouTube, the answer. I don't answer every single comment, but I do if I can. It was just something that was so crazy and so over the top and insulting, and so I get it. I mean, it is discouraging, and but I think maybe my missionary analogy is the best one. Is that anytime a missionary goes out into a world that's not religious, not Catholic, not really open to our point of view, you got to expect it. And people correctly intuit that we're offering a totalizing view of the world. I'm not just sharing some little side hobby that I got. I'm sharing what I think is the meaning of it all. And so, yeah, naturally people get reactive to that. Also, I think, Brandon, it's so evident today. The psychological reaction to God, it's not on purely intellectual grounds, like, oh, that's a unconvincing argument. Let me show you why your logic is faulty. It's not that. It's, oh, geez, if there's a God, I'm not in charge of my life, but my fundamental truth is that I'm in charge of my own life. And that's where the vitriol comes from, I think. Who is this guy to be telling me that I'm not in charge of my own life? I think that's what generates a lot of it, and then the ease of communication through the new media. You're much better than I am, I must say. There are a lot of people out there better than I am. I can, maybe it's not altogether bad. Sometimes I'll respond, I hope never in a mean way, but I can respond in kind of a little counter jabbing way, because a lot of that energy, I recognize it's masculine energy. And we've determined that, a number of our viewers and listeners are young men, which I think is great because the church has a hard time reaching young men. So I don't really mind, once in a while with a young man to kind of get in there a little bit, and if he's jabbing at me, I'll jab him back a little bit. I hope never in a mean-spirited way, but, in a sort of, hey, let's get in there and duke it out a little bit. I think that's okay. My little habit of often responding with friend, comma, is for me really more than for them. what I mean is it's a reminder to me, okay, this is a person I'm talking to. This is not just these angry words, and there's somewhere lurking behind those words is a person somewhere. And so I compel myself to call him friend, so that's one way I've tried to do it. But you're much better than I am. A lot of other people are much better at handling the vitriol in this very, calm spirit and everything. But we all have different approaches to it, I suppose.
One thing I've learned is that social media has this unique dynamic, maybe similar to having like a professional debate on a stage where you have guy A and guy B who have diametrically opposed positions. Chances are extremely high that neither one of them is going to convince the other one. But the debate is not really for them. It's for the sake of the audience.
Yeah.
And I found that like on YouTube, on Facebook, especially if you're having conversations with Facebook, you might only be interacting with one or two people, but hundreds of others are lurking in the background. They're watching. They're seeing how you're going to respond. If you're responding with good arguments, if you're responding with charity. And so oftentimes it's a display for others rather than the person you're engaging.
Oh, that's quite right. And I learned that over time. Now, years ago when I was a little more involved with those things, I would get into kind of long conversations at times. And then later on, I'd hear from people who would say, yeah, I followed that conversation. And I'm like, really? You were following that whole thing? So yes, that's true. And so you got to be aware of that. It's difficult because in the moment, in the heat of the moment, you're like, who's this guy, calling me names? But yes, A, he's a person, and B, there are a lot of other persons listening in.
There's been a lot of talk and conversation and conferences throughout the church about new media. I know the Vatican's hosted several, bringing together bishops and technology leaders, all sorts of people. And a lot of times these conferences often focus more on the theological aspects of the new media rather than the more practical stuff we've been discussing here. Can you talk for a moment about that? Do we need a spirituality of new media or a theology of new media?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot to that. I think it's a theology of the mystical body. How the new media, I always think of Teilhard de Chardin, who spoke of the noosphere, that he thought in the evolutionary process, the next great step is this connection of minds all across the surface of the earth. And I don't know if he quite knew what he was talking about, but in fact, long after his death, it happened with this explosion of technology. We're now here, you're in Orlando, I'm in Los Angeles, and here you are talking like we're right next door to each other. I can communicate with people right now all over the world. So I like that. I think there's a beautiful spirituality around that we can experience our connectedness as members of a mystical body more profoundly because of the new media. And then I think there's a spirituality of evangelization around it, that it gives you such a link to people, and you can carry the gospel. I know it's now become a bit of a hackneyed image, but as the Roman roads carried Paul, I mean, they facilitated his work of evangelization. Now we got a whole new set of Roman roads, right? And even though the Roman roads were built to facilitate the management of the Roman Empire, they were used for the spreading of the gospel. Okay, maybe the internet wasn't invented for the spreading of the gospel, but heck, we can use it. Maybe YouTube, no one had that in mind when they invented YouTube, but we can use it. So that's okay. I think God has given us these tools. So those are two pieces of kind of a spirituality around this work. But I do think, let me press it further. People involved in this work have got to be disciplined the way members of religious orders were, that if we're, and I say we, all of us involved in this work of evangelizing, I think we got to be intentional about that we're part of a little troop or a brotherhood, sisterhood too, I'll include the sisters. And we have to be intentional, focused, spiritually disciplined. Like how I would challenge everyone involved in evangelization to the media. How are you praying? How often do you pray? What's the quality of your prayer life? How are you studying? And then your attachments, what are your attachments? Whether it's to pride or it's to money or it's to your own reputation. You got to be free of that stuff if you want to do this effectively. Even the stuff we're talking about, like with engaging vitriolic opponents. Well, if you're not spiritually together, that could destroy you. I mean, you could just be so drawn into that troll-like world that you become a troll. You have to be kind of above that or detached from it. And then obviously pride, money, and all the usual things, So I think that we need as a community, like a religious order. It's funny. It's causing me right now to think about that. Of like, what would a religious order today look like? So the Dominicans are responding at their time, using their tools, Benedictines, Jesuits. What's the religious order now in this media world, the social media world? At this time of post-Christian secularism, of aggressive new atheism, and yet these tools available to us, can we form like a little new Dominicans, new Jesuits, new Benedictines? You know what I mean? Anyway, make of that what you want.
Now, I'm thinking back through history of great missionary saints who were full of zeal and eager to fly off to long-forgotten countries to announce the gospel. I'm sure there's lots of people listening to this who have that same zeal in diving into this world of the new media. They see what you're doing, they see what others are doing, they say, I want to devote my energies to doing that. What would you recommend to someone wanting to break into this field of online evangelization?
I'd say read and pray. You know what I would say is bracket all the novelty for a while, bracket all that, and go back to the desert monks. Go back to the great sources, prayer and study. If you don't pray, you're not in touch with the God you're trying to propagate. If you don't pray, then you're not going to be together spiritually, and you'll be destroyed by the thing. If you don't study, you have nothing to say. And so I've always said that to my students at the seminary. I say it now whenever I'm asked. Read, 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 and read. And then when you finish with that, start reading again. You have to know the great intellectual tradition of the church if you're going to have something to say to people. Otherwise, you might be entertaining. Nothing wrong with that in itself, but it's not going to last you that long. You might be in a superficial way charming or interesting, but you won't sustain it. So I would say, again, to a young aspiring monk of the new evangelization, is do what the old monks did, read and pray. And then, I'm just kind of warming to this idea as we're speaking. Are there some people out there who are really serious about it? I mean, like with your whole life serious about it. I mean, like from the bottom of your heart serious about it. I mean, like I want to give my whole life to this. Then we got to get some monks. I mean that seriously. We got to get some religious around this ministry. So pray about it. Think about it.
Let me add one final twist on the previous question. This will be the last one. You were the rector at Mundelein there, responsible with training a new generation of priests. What role should this new media play in their priesthood? Is this something you think most or all priests should at least be on their radar?
Yeah. Years ago, before I was a bishop, I spoke to the American bishops about evangelization. And that was my final point. I said, I would urge you to take one of your bright young priests, send them off to Europe or someplace else to get a doctorate, but not for the purpose of teaching in the university or teaching in the seminary, but for the purpose of doing this work. Get someone who's like really trained, maybe with a specialization in apologetics or what we might call today fundamental theology, and make him your lead guy in your diocese. Get him right now on the internet. And then let him form a team and maybe draw some of the other younger priests to him. Yes. So short answer is yes. I emphasized that strongly when I was rector at Mundelein. I would emphasize it here in LA at St. John's Seminary. Some of the guys are more naturally gifted for it. Okay, fine. But everybody should be aware of it for sure.
It's time now for one of our questions from our listeners. We love hearing from all of our listeners, including you. And so if you have a question, just visit askbishopbarron.com and you can record your question there on any device, any phone, any tablet, any computer. Today we hear from Christopher in Texas, and he's asking a pertinent question about this work of social media and evangelization. So here's Christopher.
Hello, Bishop Aaron. This is Christopher from San Antonio, Texas. I have a question regarding social media and how to use it correctly. I used to use social media to discuss my beliefs and thoughts on God and the spirituality that I've gained through prayer and meditation. But since doing so, I've been the target of much judgment and insults and persecution. Where do you draw the line, and when should you not do that?
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's related to what we were talking about earlier. Don't get discouraged, I would say. I'd be willing to bet for every person that gives you a hard time, there are 10 or 25 people who are benefiting from what you're sharing. And they're not going to communicate with you, maybe. You'll never know about them in this life anyway. But your reflections are having an effect on them. That's my guess. I don't know that for sure, but I'd guess it. And so that's a trick of the devil, by the way, whom I take very seriously, is the devil hates this work because it's a way of getting the gospel out effectively, and he knows that better than we do. And so what's he going to do but interrupt it every way he can? And that's part of this whole vitriol thing and the hatred that people express. It's the dark powers. It's their way of blocking this work. So expect it. You know, all the saints talk about that. Every single one of them knows that as they start walking the path of the Lord, they're going to meet with opposition. So expect it. But then be mindful of the fact that for every person that's criticizing you or making fun of you, there are 25 who are benefiting from what you're saying. So, you know, ask for courage, ask for the grace to continue, resist the devil, solid in your faith, and ask for courage from the Lord.
Well, thanks for listening to this episode of the Word on Fire show, all about evangelizing through social media. Listen, if you want more on this topic, we have a whole film and study program dedicated to this new evangelization, these new methods and expressions and new ways of generating ardor for evangelization. You can find that by visiting wordonfire.org/store, and you'll see the Catholicism New Evangelization film and study program there. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Word on Fire show.